and welcome back to Decoding Dragons, where we break down all things House the Dragon. We're your hosts, as always, Liza and Michelle, and we're spilling the royalty and breaking down the fire for every episode.
Yes, we are. So today we're going to be talking about what happened in House of the Dragon Season 1, Episode 2, named The Rogue Prince. So I'm going to go ahead and ask you, Liza, what did you think of the episode?
It was so good, and basically there were so many cool scenes, there were so many Easter eggs to the main show, there was some dragon action, and we were here for it, and I think Rhaenyra really made a lot of strides as far as showing that she is a very capable heir. That's what I was so excited to see. There was major Dany energy in this episode, and I was here for it. What did you think?
Holy crap! So I loved it. If you look at it logistically, like, as an episode, you would kind of think it would be boring, right? There wasn't very much action, there wasn't very much visual stimulation or anything like that, but it was a Game of Thrones episode like we know Game of Thrones. There was a lot of talking, there was a lot of political standoff, there was a lot of pettiness, or a lot of really important people saying some really important things, and some decisions that were made that are really going to impact the story moving forward. So it was awesome.
I know, the dialogue is so good, and it's really like, it's everything that we loved about the first I think 5 or 6 seasons of Game of Thrones. Like, they lean on the silence and they let everything hit the way it should. And the way they're developing Alicent and Rhaenyra's friendship is very important, but it's also starting to scare me because I know the tables are about to turn really, really quickly. And we saw a little bit of that at the end of the episode. So I'm nervous and excited, but it was so good. Actually, the title of the episode itself is an Easter egg. So The Rogue Prince is actually a short story that Martin wrote about Daemon's adventures in the prelude to the Dance of the Dragons. So if anybody wants to read it, it's a super good look into what happened before the Dance of the Dragons actually kicks off and why Daemon and Otto are at each other's throats through the whole thing.
Oh, interesting. Okay, that's pretty cool. So it's a little short story nod.
Yeah, and it was neat because the majority of this episode was kind of about Daemon and his actions and the way it was affecting others. So I thought them naming the episode The Rogue Prince after the short story was a really good call.
So one thing I really enjoyed was, obviously, the big scene in this episode was going to be the Rhaenyra Daemon scene in Dragonstone, right? So we do get to go back to Dragonstone. We see the stairs that Jon Snow was on and hiding from dragons. And then we see freaking Rhaenyra come out of clouds, which was the best thing ever. But one thing I really thought was interesting, there was a scene in the trailer that we were both really excited for where it was Syrax and Caraxes, we assumed, in Dragonstone, flying kind of together. You know, one of them was perched on something, another one was flying. We kind of assumed they were kind of living harmoniously, like on a morning jaunt or something like that. But what it actually turned out being was not that at all, where Caraxes was there kind of intimidating people for Daemon, and then Syrax comes in with Rhaenyra on her back to try to intimidate Daemon again. So I thought that was really interesting that they kind of manipulated that scene for the trailer, and then it was actually something completely different.
Yeah, like it looks like, dragons are on Dragonstone. Look, it's a friendly situation, but absolutely not a friendly situation. I mean, it could have been less friendly, I guess, if you think about it. There could have been some violence. But it was so neat to see the whole standoff and how the dragons were like mimicking their rider's energy and intent. Like that scene where it goes from Caraxes to Daemon and from Rhaenyra to Syrax, you're just like, I'm getting major like Dragon Bond vibes right now, because I'm assuming that, I mean, Rhaenyra wrote in on Syrax, but I'm assuming that Daemon like called Caraxes the way Dany did in the earlier episodes of Game of Thrones. So I'm just like, I love the little nods to, oh look, dragon came out of nowhere, just kidding.
That's really interesting. And actually, in that scene, really quickly, I have to bring this up. The way that Daemon tossed that dragon egg like a fucking potato. Can he even do that?
Rhaenyra had if she bounced back a little bit when she caught it. I was like, so I suppose if you had to be rude, that's the safest way for you to be rude, right? That's the best way for you to do it. You're not threatening anybody throwing something at them, but I imagine they're very heavy. Because she leaned all the way back when she caught it. I was like, now what if she had bad reflexes? Like, what if she dropped the egg? What happens?
That's the thing. It made me clutch my pearls, and I was like, oh, can he even do that? Can you even throw a dragon egg like that? I don't even know.
I imagine they're kind of like, you know, those CrossFit bags that you can lift and stuff, like the medicine balls or whatever they're called. Heavy as hell, right?
Right.
I don't even know, but I was like, that's the safest way for you to be rude. If you're going to be rude in front of all those soldiers and dragons, that's probably the way to go.
Okay, that's a good point. That's a good point. And you mentioned like there was big Dany energy. I'm looking down at my notes from the episode, and one thing I wanted to point out before we really got into it, though, was the way that they are having kind of Daemon and Rhaenyra say similar things that we know of from Daenerys, right?
Yeah.
So they're really portraying this House of Targaryen the way we know the Targaryens to be, simply from Dany doing it.
Yeah.
And what was interesting is I did some research and I saw that the Fire and Blood series was actually released in 2018, and Game of Thrones, the show, finished in 2019, which to me means Dany was full on Targaryen before the world even understood what that meant. And I really appreciated that from yesterday.
That's so neat. That's so neat. Yeah, because, like, we know what Targaryen stands for from Dany. Like, because but the thing is, like, she knew enough about her family to know what her family stood for, but she didn't have a chance to grow up with them the way that these characters have. Like, her and Viserys, right, were on the run for, like, a majority of their lives, so she wasn't able to be fully part of her family's culture. But I think overall it did kind of serve her well enough because she got to learn from a lot of other people on her journey. Yeah. I think that kind of made her a very unique character overall. But it is really nice, like, seeing her ancestors, especially Rhaenyra. She's like, when I'm queen, I'll create a new order. I'm like, we've heard this before and we're here for it.
Yeah, same thing as like Daemon's letter, even when he was like, I'm the rightful heir to the Iron Throne. I'm like, well, we've heard that before. And then there was a statement of, somebody bent the knee. And I was like, well, we've heard that before.
I wonder how it's going to go this time. Yeah, no, but like I think that the Targaryens have all been very entitled, which is like a big part of usually where their downfall starts. But it's also very interesting to see the drama that their entitlement leads the story to. Well, I have a couple questions for Michelle because you're a huge, huge fan of the show. So we're going to get into our blood section, the juice, the tea, the drama, the salt, and we're going to get into it right now. Okay, so we saw several Game of Thrones Easter eggs throughout the whole show. We saw the dining room in the Red Keep. We saw the room at Dragonstone with the dragon's head on the wall. Not the actual dragon head on the wall, but the stone carving version. And the stone carving version. And then we had the stairway leading to the castle. What was your favorite Easter egg in the whole thing?
Oh, gosh. So to choose one, that's really difficult.
Right.
Before I answer, I will say when Viserys was talking to Rhaenyra and was saying that since the death of his wife, the Red Keep has lost her warmth and he doesn't know if she'll ever get it back. I just have to say that the Red Keep and the dining room, which is where I was going with this, looks very warm just because Cersei isn't there. So Viserys needs to sit down a little bit. Like, there's worse things coming, I promise. No, anyway.
You thought this was bad. It gets worse.
Right, I promise. The Red Keep is warm right now.
Got you.
But I think my absolute favorite, had to be the room at Dragonstone because I freaked out when I noticed that the war table wasn't there. I was like, right? It's just a little Walmart fold-out table in the middle of Dragonstone. It's not this big, intricate war table that people are going to use to plot and plan and do all this stuff with. Oh my gosh, that was so cool.
I know, and I thought the same thing. First of all, I was like, oh, we get to see the room again, because I immediately knew what room it was. And my friends who were watching it were like, oh, it's been a minute since we've seen this. But I think it shows how much Dragonstone has changed. Like, it's a dining room. The room is a dining room, and it turned into a war table room. And so I'm assuming the war table we see from the trailer is actually going to be somewhere else in the castle, maybe kind of closer to, not in, but closer to the throne room, perhaps. But I think that's a really nice thing to say.
So that's interesting. I actually thought maybe the war room was going to be just later in the timeline, but you're right. In the trailer where you see, I think Rhaenyra standing next to it, it kind of looks like it's that room, but it might not be.
Yeah. And so I'm just so interested in seeing like how Dragonstone has changed between the time that, Daemon and Mysaria are there and the time that Dany gets there. Because you see the beach that she walked up on when they landed on that big pan in, and I was just like, Dany's walked on the sand here. And I got really emotional.
I know, yes. It's the same thing as the stairs, like the example you gave with that too. The stairs leading up where we see Jon Snow hiding from dragons, and now we have people who are on the same stairs used to dragons just flying around.
Yeah, and like they see it and they are scared, but they also kind of know that if the dragon ate them, it would probably cause like a huge event and probably spark some warfare. So they're like, the dragon probably won't eat us, but it might. Like, it really might.
The fear is there.
Agreed. Like the fear is there, the threat is there, the show of force is there, but also they're not fully burning cities yet, right? So there's like this interim imbalance between what the dragon riders are doing with their dragons at this point versus what we saw Dany do with hers. So I think it was very interesting, which brings me to the other thing that I thought was really interesting and another misdirection the show did. So the conversation between Rhaenys and Rhaenyra gave me a totally different vibe in the trailer versus how it played out on the screen. So what did you think about their conversation?
So, I've been really excited about Rhaenys talking to Rhaenyra because, like you said, we kind of thought it was going to be more of like a maternal conversation or big sister maybe feeling about it. I'm a little conflicted by it because I'm not sure. You can see that Rhaenys is really burned. Her and Corlys totally have this chip on their shoulder. Her husband, Corlys Velaryon, totally have this chip on their shoulder because she's supposed to be the one on the Iron Throne, right? And so it does seem like she's trying to be helpful to Rhaenyra and just letting her know, I know you're young, I know you have a lot of life to live, and you have a lot of things to experience still. Let me give you some of my experience because this is how things are actually going to go. And so she's trying to not have Rhaenyra be blindsided by the world, I think. I do think her intentions are true, but she's also trying to, like, share some of that chip on her shoulder to be like, listen, man, you got a long ways to go, and it's not going to go the way you think it is.
Yeah, no, I agree. You can definitely feel like the bitterness there also, but I agree. It felt like she was kind of trying to give her like a been there, done that warning. And also, like, when she said, do you tell that to them while you're pouring their cups? And Rhaenyra didn't have a comeback. And I was like, uh-oh. Because the warning is very clear. She's like, it's not going to be as easy as you think it is. And your father is no fool. Like, he knows how difficult this is going to be for him and for you. And so I was surprised and a little taken aback to see it going in that direction. But, and also, I do have to, like, make a note for those who have read Fire and Blood. It could have just been, like, my personal reading experience, but she seems very different with the translation on screen versus how she is in the books. Seems very different. Like, you knew that she obviously had, like, a chip on her shoulder from being spurned during the vote, but she always came across as, I guess, not necessarily approachable, but not as standoffish as she is in the show.
Okay.
So it's been really interesting watching the portrayal of Rhaenys in the show versus how I read her in the book. I'm like, this isn't who I thought she were going to be, but I'm still excited to see it.
Interesting. Okay, that's good to hear. That's good to know. Because I was wondering if she was always going to be kind of that standoffish. And I'm also curious to know if there's something that maybe happens in the future that causes her to not quite be as standoffish and be a little bit more gentle and nurturing instead of the hard bitch that she is.
Yeah. I am excited to see how they kind of translate whatever may happen on screen, and so how she decides to kind of, in the future War for Secession, I know what side she's going to pick, but I don't know how much spoilers everybody wants. Obviously, if you're watching our podcast, you're here for some spoilers. You've probably seen the episode, but I don't want to go too deep into it. So just in case you want to be a little surprised, you can still be a little surprised. But I'm excited to see what happens and how she decides and makes up her mind as to what side of the War for Secession she is on. And I am so excited to see that. But speaking of standoffs, what did you think about the standoff between Daemon and Otto and Rhaenyra?
So clutch. It was so good. So I really appreciated the Daemon and Otto standoff to begin with. It was really starting to crescendo into something that was not going to be good. But I really enjoyed that Rhaenyra came in full Dany vibes. We finally got to see a saddle. That was super cool.
I know, that was neat.
Yeah, I really appreciated that. And then the way that she just comes in and walks through everybody, kind of parts everybody. And she challenged Daemon's familial ties, right? It's basically just challenged his, are you actually an honorable man or are you just being a dick?
Like how far are you willing to go for this show you're putting on?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so it was interesting because Mysaria, I didn't know about the part in the book where Mysaria had a miscarriage. So when it came to the fact that the letter that Daemon had left where the dragon egg was a lie, and Mysaria didn't even know, I found that really interesting. I was like, oh, dang, what a twist.
Well, yeah, that's a big deviation from the books, and I have two theories. The first is they're just taking creative liberties and they want to change the show a little bit, maybe because of pacing and filming. And the second is that maybe because Martin does have some direction in the show, I'm wondering if maybe it's his way of saying that the Fire and Blood history got it wrong. So because Massaria makes it like she's got a very clear statement. She's like, I ensured that I couldn't have children a long time ago. But in the books, what happens is he gets her pregnant. He steals the dragon egg, and Viserys finds out about it, gets super upset. He makes Daemon return the dragon egg and send her back to Lys, and she loses the baby on her, her voyage, and obviously they're both very, very hurt by that, and that causes even more tension and strife between Daemon and Viserys. But in the show, clearly they're gonna kind of go a different direction with that, so I'm wondering if maybe it's just the fact the situation has threatened his relationship with Massaria is what's gonna make him so upset. And also, like, her lines were amazing. I was like, I'm so interested to see her character develop over time. She's like, I'm not here in service to you, or like here working with you, or whatever they're doing.
Right.
Because she wanted, his status and his power and all that kind of stuff. She wanted to not have to be afraid anymore. And he, by his decisions, jeopardized the one thing she wanted from their like relationship. And I'm like, maybe what's going to happen is instead of, them losing a baby, maybe it jeopardizes his relationship with her. And that's enough to kind of send him on his spiral and his thing that he goes off to do with Corlys.
Her saying that she's been sold so many times she can't even remember where she's from. It's like, oh
Right.
my Lord, what a line.
I know, and I know it was very, very powerful, and like the way she delivered it was just perfection. So, and I think the Targaryens have always come from such an entitled place. It's always good to kind of put them up against people who are like, no, you are a very privileged person, and it's not a good thing.
Right.
I'm going to remind you that the fact that not everybody else in the world is like you, and you need to be reminded of that very strongly on a regular basis.
Yeah, but and in regards to the question with the standoff, I really enjoy that Rhaenyra is able to put Daemon in his place. Like, there's obviously
Yes,
some
agreed.
chemistry there. There's obviously something going on. We know the Targaryens are freaking weird.
Yeah.
And we know there's some big issue between Otto and Daemon, but you can see that Rhaenyra has, like, the balls of steel that we've known Daenerys to have, and, like, just goes into his face and says, listen, if this is going to be an issue, why don't you take care of it now?
Yeah, it's like, if you're going to do it, do it. And she totally calls his bluff because she knows he can't do it. And he knows he can't do it. And like that, because, yeah, we know there's some chemistry. The nastiness is strong. However, that little moment where he's looked at her like, maybe I will. And she's like her face changes just a little bit when she sees it on his face. He's like, nah, I can't do it. Never mind. And he's like, fuck this. Throws dragon egg, storms out. I was like, whew, this could have gone badly.
Just the toss of that dragon egg, man, that gets me. It kills me every time.
Right, like, way to be rude without actually being as rude as you could have been.
Gosh.
Like, the statement was still made, but it was kind of, I kind of got toddler energy from it. Like, okay, fine, fuck you. Yeah, so that was really, it was such a good scene, and so much of this episode really expands on and like goes into the lore from the book Fire and Blood. Like I said, like the title itself is in fact a reference back to the Rogue Prince short story. So much of the events are in there, so we're definitely going to be getting into our lore talk with all the details right now in our fire section. Woot woot!
So my first question for you is, what did you think of the visual of Caraxes intimidating Otto at Dragonstone?
First of all, it was so scary. Okay, so obviously Drogon and Rhaegal and Viserion were scary in the way only a dragon can be, but Caraxes has a much more like, there's more visceral fear when you see Caraxes looking at you than it was when I think you saw like Drogon or something. And obviously if anyone's gonna be like in front of a dragon, they're gonna be afraid. But the way that like his neck like moves and you can see his throat move when he's like doing the dragon screech thing, it was so terrifying. And like, I don't normally want to like inch away from the screen when I see dragons on screen, but I found myself leaning backwards like, oh God.
Right. So in the book, are they doing a good job visually comparing the book to the show?
I think so, and I've seen my friends always send me like such super cool House of the Dragon stuff on TikTok and Instagram, and I see that they're working hard to make sure the dragons are distinguishable from each other because there's going to be so many, so we're going to have to instantly know who we're looking at when we see them. And I think they are doing a really good job translating the way Caraxes is described in the book to on screen, and Syrax also. It's nice seeing Syrax kind of being in her groove with Rhaenyra, so that was super cool to see them coming up. And I really like the way that the dragons kind of match their rider's attitude a little bit. Like, I thought that was really neat. It's a good touch.
Yeah, I felt like there was a lot of meaning behind his roar. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't just a meaningless roar. There was a lot of emphasis and feeling behind that.
Yeah, he's like, you need to back the fuck up.
Get away.
My person is in trouble. I'm here.
Yeah. So talking about book aspects, that leads me into my next question. So we do have the awkward Targaryen nastiness that we have, but then we get the awkward, the king needs to remarry in this episode, right? So he's an older guy comparatively in the timeline. And Corlys Velaryon proposes that he marries his daughter Laena, who is like 12.
The show lets you know that she's very little.
And
yeah.
she's so cute. The actress is adorable and she's doing a really good job. But is that proposal actually in the book, or was that creative liberty?
It is actually in the book. It's actually in the book. And I think that myself and viewers everywhere were very, very happy he chose Alicent for obvious reasons. But the reason the proposal was made was for political purposes. So because there's a huge rift between House Targaryen and House Valyrian. So while I'm very happy he chose Alicent, I am worried and nervous about the political repercussions of the decision that he made, like the political decision making there. It was interesting to see how he did that.
Yeah, and the decision he makes is essentially going to be part of the crux of the issue, right? Because they're trying to mend the issues now, and he just kind of turned his back on him.
Yeah, no, one would absolutely argue that he made things worse with his decision. However, personally, for obvious reasons, I am glad he picked Alicent, but politically, it was interesting seeing him make that decision.
Yeah, one of those awkward moments was when he was like, what did your father tell you to say that? And then it was like, what did your mother tell you? And she's like, I don't have to bed you till I'm 14. It's like, oh no.
Like, that doesn't make it better. It just made it worse. Yeah, it's like it just made it worse. And I am happy the way the show portrayed. Like, the show lets you know that the show is not on board with the way it happened. They're just
right.
like, no, this is very clearly the wrong choice. This
right.
is very clearly Alicent over here is the way he's gonna go, because I mean, there's a huge age difference, and Alicent is obviously much older than Laena at the time. So
yeah.
you can definitely see why Viserys went whoop to Alicent and just like, thank you.
Right. And they did have a long discussion kind of about Vhagar. There were a lot of questions about Vhagar, which I really found interesting because Laena said something that she's too big to fit in the dragon pit.
Right.
Which means, to me, that translates to, because we already saw Syrax and Caraxes in the dragon pit, that you're already starting to kind of see the downfall of utilizing the dragon pit.
Right, that's a good point, because Vhagar wasn't kept in there for long, and Syrax and Caraxes are much smaller than Vhagar. Can I be honest, when I first saw the clouds ripple, I thought maybe Vhagar had been camping out on Dragonstone and we were about to see her come up, but then I realized, I was like, no, this is from the trailer, it's going to be Syrax.
Right.
But they did like,
awesome scene.
It was so good. They saw the cloud ripple and I was like, is it Vhagar? But then I was like, no, they're going to save that for a big reveal later on, probably.
Right. Speaking of Alicent and the king also, so we see a lot of time spent in the king's chambers. We see Alicent visiting him often. So one of the things that we saw him working on was the structures of Old Valyria, and he is giving Alicent kind of a history lesson of Old Valyria. Is there any lore in the book or anything that you've read as to why he's so interested in the histories of all of that?
Well, that's actually a really good question. I don't think they really go too far into that with Viserys' character in the book because of the way the book is structured, and it covers like a really long timeline. But I also noticed that I think the opening credits also either are the moving through the streets of Valyria or are based on Valyria. So I think it's just, reiterating the fact that they have very strong ties to it. And I think Viserys, while he doesn't really rule with an iron fist, I think he has, peaceful ambitions. And he may, look back at Valyria and be like, this is what our family was. But you can see he's also a realist. He's like, we're not going to get there again. And I also really liked how they used the symbolism of the broken dragon and Alicent kind of mending it as like, his broken heart. Alicent has been spending time to him, spending time with him, and she's like mending his world a little bit because Valyria is the world that he lives in, when he's doing his carvings, etc. And she's like taking this time to mend that and hand it back to him because they had to give us a reason to like Alicent. Like you have to like her in order to care about what happens. So I thought that was like a really nice way to do that. Overall,
that's a really good analogy to think. I didn't think of it like that. That was good.
Yeah, because she hands it back to him, and he's like, "Oh, this is very, very important. Thank you so much." Because, because they have to give us a reason to get attached to Alicent in order for what's going to happen later to really hit. And I think that was a really good way to do that because you already know that it wasn't her idea; it was 100% her father's idea. But she's also like she starts off a really nice person, like as far as we know, unless she's playing the doe-eyed innocent. That will change later, so we'll see. As far as we know right now, she seems like a nice person, and I think that, Viserys is a nice person, even if that doesn't always serve him well on the throne. Alicent is a nice person, and then right now, at this time, they're getting along.
So I did do a little research into the intro. I know we got the same theme as Game of Thrones, which was, I loved it. I thought it was great. But they obviously did the animations a little bit differently, and not all of this is going to be accurate, but what I read briefly was that it is supposed to represent Old Valyria, so we learned that they're they built their capital within the mouth of a volcano. Why anybody thinks that's a good idea, I have no idea. But they wanted to be closer to the dragons' power, where the source of their power, right? So dragons have to be in the heat, all of that jazz. Obviously, the volcano erupts. But the opening credits are supposed to mimic all of the blood coming out of Old Valyria. And entering into, like, it's supposed to mimic the Targaryen bloodline. So you see it split off in several areas, and then you can see some crests, house crests, and some of them are supposed to represent, like, Rhaenys, and then you have Corlys, and then you have, like, all of these different crests and splits and stuff. So I don't have it fully detailed yet, but I want to look into it because it looks like it's really intricate.
I know. I saw the House Aaron's sigil, and I was like, because Emma it was Emma Aaron. So, and she had, obviously, because of the way, like, her hair appears, she had some Targaryen blood in there, too. So that makes so much sense. I knew it was something to do with Valyria, but I was too lost in the moment to really, like, delve in and think about it just then. But it looks so good. And I love that we got the same theme, but the opening is so different. Also, I like the theme of, like, it's fire and blood, and the opening theme is blood. So I thought that was very interesting because we're going to get plenty of fire on the show.
Right. And then the ending is the Targaryen symbol, and it's in the mouth of the volcano and the fire.
Yeah. Yeah, and like the Doom of Valyria is probably something we should get into in like a future episode because it's so intricate and there's so many theories. And, the dragon dreams with Aegon and them has a history with, how the Targaryens escaped Valyria. So I think that's like something we should definitely get into in a future episode.
I'm fascinated by the Doom of Valyria. I'd love to get into that. So my final question for you, actually, we didn't really get into it last episode. We did mention the cat's paw dagger. We see King Viserys is always wearing the cat's paw dagger. So give us all the lore behind it.
I got you. So I could be wrong, but I think that the cat's paw dagger itself may actually be a Game of Thrones show creation. So obviously it's Valyrian steel, so it's going to come from, old Valyria, and we know that Valyrian steel kills White Walkers, and that's what Arya uses to eventually kill the Night King. And so the chronological timeline is so interesting because he's holding the dagger, when he's telling Rhaenyra about the fact that a Targaryen has to be in some sort of power to help defeat the Long Night, and you've got Dany and Jon, who are both Targaryens at the Battle of Winterfell defeating the Long Night, while Arya uses a Valyrian steel blade to kill the Night King, right? So, and his books are probably going to deviate to some degree, but the canon for that part of the story that we have now is the show canon. So that's what we're going to use until we get the book canon, right? So, but I think another piece of Valyrian steel, there's two different things that we could look at. So while I don't have a lot of lore for the cat's paw dagger, I do have some for the two main swords. So Blackfire, which is the sword that that Viserys is holding when he's on the Iron Throne, is like a show of power because he doesn't have a dragon right now because Valyrian died. So his next tie to Targaryen royalty, that like as like a show of power and his standing is going to be black fire, which was actually Aegon the Conqueror's sword. And so it's been handed down to like firstborn son or reigning king since then. And that's why whenever you see him on the Iron Throne, he's holding the sword, because it's like a reminder to those he's talking to that, yes, I am the king sitting in the Iron Throne. You will listen to me. This is Aegon the Conqueror's sword. It's like a status symbol, right? And then Dark Sister is actually, which is the sword that Daemon has, and they look notably different. Like Blackfire has a different hilt than Dark Sister does. Dark Sister has like a little bit more of a winged hilt. So Dark Sister is a sword that Daemon has, which is the one, he gave Rhaenyra the Valyrian steel necklace, and he's like, now we both have a piece of our heritage. And that's actually Visenya's sword. So Visenya is Aegon the Conqueror's sister/wife, because the whole intermarrying thing is a thing from old Valyria. So they both used those swords as they kind of conquered Westeros and brought 6 out of 7 kingdoms into the fold. So it's super, super neat to see those. And I'm going to guess that since those are still around, maybe canonically, not canonically, the cat's paw dagger is from Valyria as well. We just don't know exactly where it's from yet, so it could be like a family heirloom, kind of like Blackfire and Dark Sister are. And I don't remember them ever mentioning that Aegon's second sister, Rhaenys, the first Rhaenys, not this Rhaenys, had a sword. So I mean, I guess there's always the possibility that in the fictional non-canon show world that maybe it was Rhaenys' dagger. So, and that's why they've got it with the other 2 swords. That's not, confirmed anywhere. That's just off the top of my head theory. So just a thought.
And to clarify, because I think we just mentioned Vhagar earlier without actually telling anybody who she was, that was Visenya's dragon, correct?
Yes, so Aegon came over on Valyrian, and then Visenya had Vhagar, and the first Rhaenys had Meraxes, or Meraxes, however you say their name.
Right.
So Vhagar is now the oldest surviving dragon. I don't remember if she saw Valyria or if she was born on Dragonstone, but I know that she is the oldest and largest dragon. And also Visenya was much more fire and blood energy than Rhaenys was, so Vhagar may have a bit of a bad attitude.
Oh, good.
Maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, Vhagar may be a little bit edgy.
I do know that Meraxes or Maxes and Vhagar were both born on Dragonstone, I believe, or Westeros. So Balerion was the only one that has seen Old Valyria.
That makes total sense, because I was thinking about it as they were talking about it. I was like, I know Vhagar is almost as old as Balerion, but I thought maybe she was born on Dragons, and I just could not remember. So yeah, I'm so glad you knew that off the top of your head. That's awesome.
I was doing some research today about it, and there are 2 things that I have also researched with the cat's paw dagger, which I do think you're right. I do think that it is show canon, and I feel bad if I'm wrong because I have read the books, but it's been a long time since I read the books. But I saw something today that when they were talking about the cat's paw dagger, there was a really cool screenshot of it that had it almost looked like a ruby, but it wasn't a ruby. And that's when they were discussing the bloodline of the Targaryens and why they built the capital of Old Valyria into the volcano, was to get closer to the dragon, source of their power. And then they were Viserys was talking about the blood mages doing their magic, which they actually think they took some Targaryen blood and dragon blood and mixed them together. So what I'm interested to see is if that little ruby on the cat's paw dagger is actually some type of like dragon blood, or the mix of Targaryen and dragon blood, or something like that, and so it holds a lot more power than just being Valyrian steel. That's completely just me making it up, but I would be really interested to know if that's something that happens.
It would be really interesting, and like the Doom of Valyria and how it came about, there's so many theories, because I think that Viserys mentioned something about the dark magic they were practicing in Valyria. I have also read the theory about the gene splicing, and that's how Targaryens can ride dragons in the first place, because they were messing around with that, and that's the way that the Targaryen family and a few other Dragon Lord families could ride them in the first place. I've heard theories that there was some familial wars going on, and they assassinated the people who were controlling the volcanoes with that magic, and that's how it blew up. So I'm just like, we could just dive into the whole thing, and maybe like a post-season bonus episode or something. We could just do like the Doom of Valyria, how it really happened.
Right, that would be awesome.
We'll see how it goes, but it might be like a post-season episode, like a bonus.
Yeah.
Because yeah, knowing where the Targaryens came from definitely lends a whole lot more like weight and credence to what they're doing now. So, and I am excited to see what the cat's paw dagger is going to be doing in the show, because there's this scene. So Viserys cut his hand. You know that it's infected. It's gross. He's got, they had him try different remedies to fix it. So there's a theory that in the scene where Alicent and Rhaenyra, Alicent has the knife and Rhaenyra's like caught her hand. There's a theory that Alicent snatches it out of Viserys' belt and then runs at Rhaenyra, and he like falls, because I think someone did like a zoomed out picture and there's someone sitting or fallen looking on the sides like before he could stop her from grabbing it. So I think that we're going to see a lot of tension and turmoil surrounding the dagger, and it might become like a really important like symbolic piece for the show throughout.
Can we talk about the maggots really quickly?
We could talk about the sound. Okay, this could be a very weird thing. I'm not sure if anybody else felt this way, but the eating sounds and the maggot sounds in the episode were very heightened.
Agreed.
Like, I can hear every bite, every chewing thing. I can hear the maggots moving. I was like, ugh.
Unnecessary.
It was super cringe, but I know they were trying to like hang on the silence, so you just how quiet the room was. We've all been in those situations where it's so quiet, no one's talking, you can hear everything, and how uncomfortable it is, and you're just like, I am 100% getting the vibe of this scene right now. And also it was a totally different scene than we saw in the dining room, because I think it was like Loras and Cersei and like the Tyrells and Joffrey last time we saw that dining room, and I was like, this is a totally different situation right here.
Yeah, that's why the warmth is completely different. Yeah, so Sansa was in there. I think the last time we saw, I think you're right, was probably with like Loras and Joffrey and Marjorie. The energy was weird, and it was so different. Like it was tension for a different reason, and you can kind of see how the dissension between Rhaenyra and her father is growing, because she's trying to prove herself capable, and I think he's just protective. But also I think he doesn't do a good job of making up his mind to things. Like Viserys is not an Iron Fist king, right? Yeah. So I think he's just not sure how to proceed, and so he just tries to navigate conversations in like a strange way. He's just like, I want you to be like heir, but I'm not ready for your input yet because I'm not sure what's going to happen. So I don't really know where that's going to go, like between the tension there and how they're feeling about each other, especially after the announcement that he's engaged to his daughter's best friend. Yeah. So one thing I did really appreciate was during the Viserys and Rhaenyra conversation, when he mentioned, instead of him just going like for absolute power for his family, he was more concerned about his familial security, honestly. And he made just some comment about, we need to make sure that we have more heirs so our family stays secure and on the throne. And it wasn't necessarily for a lust of power. It was just, he wants to make sure that his kids are set and okay.
Yeah, agreed. And there was also a really big emphasis on choice in this episode, because Rhaenyra wants a choice in the matter of what's going on with the kingdom. She wants a say in the matter. Daemon had a strong point. He's like, I don't have a wife of my choosing. It's not who I want. I didn't get a say in the matter. And Viserys, who is king, does have a say in the matter that his brother did not get. And so you can kind of see how they're going to kind of have more dissension for that. Daemon's like, well, I have to listen to everything you say, but you can make whatever decision you want. And it's just
right.
like, because he's the little brother and his big brother is the king, and you can see there is a little bit of jealousy there, but he's also not entirely sure about how to go about it without getting himself truly kicked out of Westeros.
And being an insult.
Yeah. Because I think he does love his brother. I think he really does love his brother. I think he's just not sure how to make a name for himself. And that's why Corlys and Daemon's conversation was so impactful. Corlys is like, I have built my family by the strength of my back, and I know you want to make a name for yourself too. Let's combine our forces. And Daemon's like, I think I will. This sounds like a plan.
That is an excellent segue into our next segment.
Yes, which is actually our Dragon Dream section, which is where we're going to try and predict what's going to happen in the next episode. So let's get into our Dragon Dreams predictions and see what we think we're going to see in House of Dragon Season 1, Episode 3. All right, Michelle, what do you think is going to happen in the next episode?
Oh, gosh. Okay, so I just want to give you some credit. You were right last week with the scene in Dragonstone being in this episode. So next episode, I definitely think there's going to be more action. There's going to be some battle. The Corlys and Daemon conversation obviously is going to lead us to potentially the Stepstones issue,
right?
Which we can get into. So next episode, I do think that they're going to move further on down the timeline. So this episode, they jumped, like a half a year down the timeline. So they are trying to move it pretty quickly because they need to get to the point, essentially. So I do think we're going to move on down the timeline a little bit. I think it might be past the wedding of Alicent and Viserys. I don't know how far along I could say, maybe another half a year, because he said he wanted to marry her by the spring.
Right.
So I think they're going to be married. I think Rhaenyra and Alicent's relationship is going to be even more estranged than when we left it. And I think some battle scenes are definitely going to happen potentially in the Stepstones.
Agreed. I actually thought that the Stepstones might be our finale because of like the huge set piece potential there. However, I have since changed my mind. So if anybody reads mine and Michelle's articles on CouchSoup, I was thinking that it'd be the finale of the Stepstones, but I actually think that the Stepstones might be a middle piece because Corlys and Daemon are already like gearing up to go over there. So I think that in our next episode, there's a possibility we'll get the scene where Alicent walks down the, not really the aisle, but walks down into the feast area and kisses Viserys on the cheek. We may possibly get somewhere close to the wedding scene where Rhaenyra and Laenor are dancing. It could be like a betrothal or something, because he might be trying to heal the rift he made between himself and the Valyrians by betrothing Rhaenyra to Corlys' son Laenor, and try to politically heal the rift that way, make amends a little bit. And also I think we're going to learn more about the crab feeder, because they were giving us a lot of images of what he's up to in there. He's called the crab feeder because he stakes people out in the beach to be eaten by crabs, which is a horrible way to go. But so we're seeing some more of that. So I think we're going to kind of get more of the politicking behind starting a war in the Stepstones, and we might be getting closer to the wedding, but I'm not sure because I'm going by Daemon's hair, right? So his hair seems short at the wedding, but it looks longer in the Stepstones war. So I'm wondering if maybe it's War of the Stepstones and then he comes back to the wedding feast after, because in the book what happens is, he goes to the Stepstones, he gets his what is it? I think it's King of the Narrow Sea or something is how he styles himself. And then he comes back to re-meet with his brother. And that's a whole big moment right there, which is kind of what we see Graham McTavish doing, where he's got the sword and Daemon's walking down toward the throne, and he's got his driftwood crown or something. He's got a wooden crown. So that's probably what we're going to see. But my theory for now, that I'm just going to be nice and super safe, I think we're probably going to see Alicent walk down and kiss Viserys on the cheek. We're going to see more Stepstone action, and we're going to learn more about the crab feeder.
So I want to go into a theory really quickly you made me think of.
Yeah.
The first time I ever heard the name Balon was Balon Greyjoy, right?
Right, Balon.
So something that you just brought up, if if Daemon does name himself the King of the Narrow Sea and he has a driftwood crown or whatever, if they ever have familial ties from the Targaryens that stay where the Greyjoys are, and the name is escaping me right now, then maybe that is where the name Balon came from, which I think is going to be really interesting.
It could be possible. So Balon is actually, if I remember correctly, Balon is the name of Viserys and Daemon's father, and that's the Targaryen spelling, the Valyrian spelling, which is the Baelon. And I don't remember if the Greyjoy spell it the same. It could be a Blon, but the Targaryen blood does kind of go throughout. The Greyjoy, the Iron Islands does have a part in the later bit of the story. Yeah, so the Greyjoy family and the Iron Islands. I don't remember the Greyjoy character's name in the book right now, off the top of my head, but they do have a portion in the later bit of the story there. So it could be, some family ties, because the Valyrians and the Targaryens have a very unique spelling, and I'm not sure if that's a regular house name for House Greyjoy, and it's something that they had before the Targaryens came over, or if it might have been influenced. So I'm not 100% sure there, but I know that, the Targaryen influence was strong, but I don't know for a fact if they ever married if they ever married into the Greyjoy house.
Right. Yeah. No, that would be interesting.
Agreed. So I think we're both super excited to see what happens in the next episode. I think we're going to see some more Stepstone actions. Probably not Caraxes torching foot soldiers right off the bat, but they have to get there first. So you're probably going to see Daemon and Corlys getting the ships together, preparing all that. And I think we're probably going to see the stuff with Alicent and Rhaenyra kind of start to come to a head a little bit more, because that was just a crushing blow. And I don't understand why he didn't tell her he was going to name Alicent as his fiance when he was having a conversation with her before. And then he acted surprised when she seemed hurt by it. I was like, you probably should have just told her before. But I'm just really interested to see the drama and everything going into that. So I am hype.
Yeah, I'm so excited. And I really, really quickly want to shout out Graham McTavish as a friend of
Right.
CouchSoup. He is killing it on the show. I'm so excited that he's almost like a regular.
Yes, and it's good to see. Harold Westerling as a character kind of being in support of Rhaenyra, because half the small council is like, no, it makes no sense for her to be the heir, and the other half is like, yeah, that works. And so it's good to see that he's basically on Rhaenyra's side. Like, you see him kind of being supportive of her. Like, he takes her to the dragon pit. He takes her to go check out her new Kingsguard person. Which that reminds me, she picked Kristen Cole as her Kingsguard when she did a great job picking that. But Kristen Cole is a key player in the future episodes, so everybody watching and listening, make sure you keep an eye on Sir Kristen Cole, because he is a player throughout the dance.
He's also easy to keep an eye on because he's pretty cute.
I think that's what Rhaenyra probably thought as well. Like, I think that throughout the story, people will definitely develop their own opinions about him. Personally, I'm just like salty about the whole situation that happens, so I'm excited for people to find out. So I'm interested to get into it. But we'll be back every Tuesday on CouchSoup.com during season 1 to recap the latest episode of House the Dragon and go into all the lore and details of future episodes.
Yeah, so be sure to hit that like button. Let us know in the comments what lore you'd like us to dive into next. And we will see you next week with all the fire and soup.